Alice, welcome to the podcast. It is amazing to have you here with us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We're excited to celebrate with you as Solitaire makes its official U.S. debut after all these years. For folks who haven't discovered this book yet, which is actually the first story in what we've come to know as the Heartstopper universe, tell us a little bit about what this is about and how we meet Tori in this book.
So, Solitaire is the story of Tori Spring, who is the older sister of Charlie from Heartstopper. Tori is a 16-year-old girl. She's very pessimistic. She hates the world. She hates everyone around her. And she's very bored with her daily school life. But one day at school, she discovers that this mysterious group called Solitaire have started to pull pranks in her school. And she meets a boy called Michael, who is very interested in finding out who is behind these pranks. And Michael is the complete opposite to Tori. He's super bubbly, quirky, cheerful. So it's through her friendship with Michael that she starts to question her kind of pessimistic view of the world.
You actually wrote this more than a decade ago now. What inspired you to take on this story and like the whole idea of Solitaire and everything as this group?
Well, I mean, it was my first book. I wrote it when I was still at school, and I just wanted a book that was about the world that I knew, which was an all-girls school in Kent, in England. I wanted to kind of explore what that was like. And what I really wanted to write about in Solitaire was the kind of, like, Tori is dealing with some kind of undisclosed mental health issue. She's very down and angry about a lot of things. And I was feeling a little bit of that at the time as well. And that was kind of what I wanted to explore when writing that book. And the idea that, you know, finding your people can really, really help, because Tori is so alone at the start of the book. She is solitary. And through, you know, her friendship with Michael, she starts to find a way out of that darkness. And the pranks and the kind of the Solitaire organization, that's more the fictional part of the story for me, to be honest. That was kind of just the fun mystery detective part of the story that I had a lot of fun creating, but wasn't really based on anything that I knew from the real world. The real world stuff was the school environment and Tori's kind of emotional journey.
The Solitaire stuff is interesting, how it, without giving away any spoilers, it just ratchets up, and to the point where you're like, oh my God, how is this happening?
Yeah.
And I kept alternating like who I thought was behind it too. So I liked having the mystery while also really feeling Tori's journey, because of course, I think all teens go through some version of that.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, she's dealing with, like, so when Solitaire first came out, everyone would just use the phrase teen angst, because that is kind of what she is giving off, is the kind of classic, you know, grumpy, moody, I hate everything. Like, that's kind of the typical vision of teen angst. But hopefully Solitaire goes a little bit deeper and kind of shows that that is actually quite a serious thing that a lot of teens are dealing with and should be taken seriously, and not just kind of, you know, shrugged at and laughed at as just a teenage thing.
This isn't the first time you revisited Solitaire. There was a 2020 re-release that happened in other parts of the world. And there's a great interview with you and David Levithon in the back of this volume. And you talk about some of the edits you did in 2020, including labeling Michael as pansexual in that book. What was it like to revisit, and what kind of led to some of the 2020 revision?
It's so interesting to read the old version of Solitaire and see the queerness of the book that I completely wasn't aware of at the time that I wrote it. One of those things being Michael. I think in the original version of Solitaire, he says something about oh, I like everyone, it doesn't matter the gender, like I could like everyone. And I think at the time I wrote Solitaire, I'd probably never even heard the word pansexual before, when that was literally what I was describing there. So it is interesting to look at how quickly things have changed, and how much more I know now. And yeah, I was really thankful that I got to make some of those small changes in the 2020 version, just to kind of update it a little bit.
And so much of it, though, seems timeless. It feels like some aspects of this, including Solitaire, could easily happen today. Especially with how the world's changed now. It seems more possible now than even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Solitaire is also Nick and Charlie's first appearance. And I absolutely love, I'll hold up the back cover for the folks who are going to watch on video. There's a little picture of them on the back cover, which I absolutely adore. What grabbed you about them to bring them to the forefront of what we've come to know as Heartstopper?
Well, in Solitaire, Nick and Charlie are already in a relationship. It's a very strong, very loving relationship. They're so supportive of each other, but we don't really learn much about their relationship outside of that. We don't know how they got together or what their kind of relationship journey has been up to this point. So after I finished writing Solitaire, I had these two characters who I really, really loved. And I knew that they had a story. Like, I wanted to know what their story was, what their origin story was. So a couple of years after Solitaire was first published, I started creating Heartstopper, which was Nick and Charlie's origin story. And it's just kind of grown from there.
And Solitaire takes place in what we've come to know as Heartstopper Volume 4. And I have to admit, as I was reading Solitaire, I went back to Heartstopper 4 and went, what do I see in here about this? But other than seeing Michael, this is all Tori's story because it's all happening at Higgs and the boys are still at their school. What was it like to go backwards and, even pick up Tori in a different time frame from where you'd written her in the first place?
It was a challenge. It really was a challenge figuring out how to show Solitaire in Heartstopper, because they are such different stories. They're so different in tone. And some of the events of Solitaire, if I suddenly put them in Heartstopper, readers would be so confused. So I really had to think very carefully and choose carefully what parts of Solitaire to put into Heartstopper. Yeah, it was a real challenge, but one I'm happy with the outcome with. Some people have questions. They ask me, why didn't you put this scene from Solitaire into Heartstopper? But I know that I made the right choice in which parts to put in there, to keep Heartstopper what it is as well, and not turn Heartstopper into some kind of Solitaire adaptation. Yeah.
Because it's interesting. I actually, because I went back to see if certain things, especially towards the end of Solitaire, had I forgotten those in foreign. It all made sense to me in a lot of ways. And it's interesting to me how the two overlap, because without giving too much away for people who, for whatever reason, may not have gotten to Heartstopper 4 either, the Spring family has a lot going on because Tori has what's happening in Solitaire, but also this is where Charlie's mental health, it's been bubbling up through, especially 2 and 3, but he also has his things going on in 4. And I feel for all of them, but I love how you deal in the mental health space, trying to, help these characters and keeping Nick and Charlie strong. And it seems like a lot to balance between the two different stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And they are very different stories. Solitaire is so much darker, and it's a much more visceral look at what having a mental illness is like. Whereas the Heartstopper, the focus is always on recovery, optimism and hope. things are going to get better, and we know that. So yeah, it's difficult to tell those two different kinds of stories about the same events, essentially, about the same characters. That's just the challenge of it. And I knew that was going to happen when I started making Heartstopper. So I had a lot of time to really think about it and figure out how I was going to do that. So yeah.
And especially going to the backwards material as well, because you're not only sorting out Nick and Charlie, but also Tori. I feel like between the two, the series of Heartstopper and Solitaire, we get to know a lot about Tori, because things happen to her that obviously we don't know that lead her to Solitaire, but she's a fascinating character in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's been really fun to show some like different sides of Tori in Heartstopper, because in Solitaire she's so kind of single-minded. She is like a pessimist, she's so like frustrated and grumpy and like moody all the time. But in Heartstopper, she's also really funny and kind of sarcastic, and we're just getting to the point in the comic now, which will be in volume 5, where we're kind of learning a bit more about Tori post Solitaire. So we're going to find out what her kind of mental state is like after the events of Solitaire, which is really interesting, and I'm really excited to kind of tell that story. So
Yeah, I can't wait till we get to go forward in the universe, because everything is like had its merge point and goes from here now.
Yeah.
I was really glad that you put kind of the advisory that you put in front of Solitaire, because having only read the Heartstopper universe, it was a significant like tonal shift. Do you ever think that you're going to visit that side of the universe again with some other story, either on Tori or some other aspects of that, what's happening over there?
I don't think I will ever write another prose novel, like a full prose novel about the characters from that universe. I think, I think Heartstopper will be, the end of that story of those characters. But yeah, like you said, I'm really glad that I put that kind of content warning into Solitaire. I actually put that in 2020 when it was re-released, because people who read Heartstopper first had been going into Solitaire expecting it to be Heartstopper vibes, which is like happy and cheerful romance, joyful story, and then being very surprised by the contents of Solitaire. So yeah, I'm glad I put that in.
And the thing that I love so much that is Tori's through line, her fierce love of Charlie. You see it in Solitaire, you see it in Heartstopper. I mean, she's there for him regardless of what's happening for her, and I love that kind of family connection there. Was it important for
Yeah, me
you to
too.
kind of get that, or did that evolve over time?
I mean, that was kind of one of the key elements of Solitaire, which it despite Tori's kind of hard shell, she has this warmth and love for her brother, and that's clear from the very start. And for me, that is kind of the symbol of hope for Tori, that she will find her way out of this kind of darkness that she's surrounded herself by. Yeah, I really, really love their relationship. And that's one of the fun things about Heartstopper as well, is showing more Tori and Charlie kind of banter and, their support for each other, and Tori's funny little, eye rolls and, sipping her little drink. Yeah.
Which now I know always is diet lemonade.
Yes.
In your creative process, how do you think about like Solitaire as a novel? Heartstopper was a web comic, and now it's, published graphic novels, but then you've also had like the novella with Nick and Charlie. What kind of helps you pick the way you're going to tell the story?
It, I mean, it depends. That's a good question, because when I decided I wanted to tell Nick and Charlie's story, I first tried to plan it out as a prose novel, because I've done that before. I'd just written Solitaire, and I thought, okay, this can be my next book. But what I found with the story is that it just didn't fit into the structure of a novel. It didn't have like the kind of gradual sort of beginning, middle, end structure that you normally get in a standalone novel. Nick and Charlie's story was a much more episodic story. It was about these kind of periods of their lives, and we're just kind of following them all the way through. There's no sort of clear middle point that you would get in a normal prose novel. And that structure, for that reason, suited being a serialized webcomic that was kind of ongoing much better. So that was kind of the route I decided to take that.
But they have had their novella moment with Nick and Charlie, which also plays with the timeline again, because you jumped a little bit forward there. Does that
Yeah.
book sit? I know it's definitely after 4. Does it kind of timeline wise even sit where after what eventually will be volume 6?
It will be, current plan is it's going to be during the events of volume 6. So like Solitaire, it will be referenced, but I won't be just retelling the whole story because that's pointless.
It's interesting. I love how you play with the timelines. What prompted like Nick and Charlie to get told as a novella at this point in, just what we know of the story?
Well, it all comes down to when I wrote these things. So
Mm.
Nick and Charlie was originally published in the UK in 2015,
Oh,
which
wow.
was after, but before Heartstopper. So I had Solitaire and the Nick and Charlie novella before I started making Heartstopper. So yeah, it just kind of happened that way.
Just so cool. You just go backwards and forwards. You're like your own little like jumping timeline.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Heartstopper 5. Folks in the UK are lucky. You get it in November as opposed to us in the US who are waiting until December. What can you tell us about what we're going to get in 5?
Yeah, so many things. So kind of two sort of things are going on, which Nick is kind of getting to the point where he needs to start applying to university. So he is kind of starting to think about his future, but has no idea what he's going to do. And he wants to stay close to home so he can stay close to Charlie, but isn't sure if that's the right thing to do. So he's got a lot to figure out. Meanwhile, he's been working really hard on his mental health, and he's been kind of trying to find confidence, some self-confidence in various things. Like he is thinking about applying to be head boy at school. He might be joining a band because we know he plays the drums. And also, Nick and Charlie are thinking about taking their relationship to the next level physically. So that's something that we haven't yet explored in Heartstopper. So yeah, there's lots to come in volume 5. I'm very excited.
It's going to be a Christmas present to myself come December. And of course, just a couple of weeks ago, we got the great news that Heartstopper Season 2 comes to Netflix in August. What's it been like bringing the webcomic literally to life on the screen so far?
It's been an amazing experience. I think I've been so lucky compared to a lot of other authors who've had book adaptation experiences. My experience has been so positive, and I've been really involved in the whole thing. I've written. I was the writer of the show, and I executive produced, so I was involved in all of the creative decisions. Yeah, I've enjoyed it so much, and I'm so happy with how it's turned out. I'm really, really excited for season 2. I can't wait for everyone to see it.
We've got a member of our Patreon community, Rebecca, who's a huge fan and has loved and watched the show multiple times, but was kind of curious what it's like to adapt the graphic novel to television. Because there's clearly some things that are different. I mean, just off the top, Charlie no longer has Oliver as his younger brother, who we've never seen. How do
Yeah.
you like make the choices of what gets to the screen and what gets to the screen matching the book perfectly in some cases, but then in other places taking the turn.
Well, I mean, firstly, I think Heartstopper is a very faithful adaptation. I think we really tried hard to make it very faithful to the books, and usually we were able to achieve that, which was really exciting. But yeah, there were definitely some choices that were different to the books, and it really just depends on what that thing was. So, for Oliver, I felt like, so the reasoning is, if we casted, a 7-year-old to play Oliver for season 1, by the time we got to season 2, he would have grown a lot, and he would no longer look 7 years old, and it would be very difficult to kind of keep that continuity if we had a very young child actor. And also, Oliver doesn't really have much to do in the story, so if we kept him out of the story, we could have more stuff for other characters. Yeah, so I know lots of people were sad about that, but I do think it was the right decision. Yeah.
How was it to go to Paris for some of the season 2 shoot?
Oh, so cool. Yeah, I'm still so excited that we got to do that. It was very stressful. It was a very stressful filming experience. Filming in public in Paris, in like a super busy city, is just, I mean, I can't believe it was even possible. But somehow we managed to film everything. I think we were there for 9 or 10 days in total. And we managed to fit almost everything in that we wanted to film. And it looks amazing. Like it just looks so amazing in the show. So I'm really happy that we got to do that.
Excellent. And are you working on scripts for 3 already?
I will be soon. We've just kind of started like the planning, figuring out what's going to happen, figuring out all the storylines that are to come. So I will have to start writing those scripts very soon. Yes.
Excellent. Is there anything you can tease us about what else might be coming next for you beyond like Heartstopper 5 and series 2 and things like that? What else is on the horizon?
Honestly, those are the only kind of writing projects that I have right now. I'm very like in Heartstopper world completely right now. I mean, I will have some more of my books re-released. I won't say what yet, but in the US and in the UK, there will be some very cool new editions of my previous books that are going to be released this year and next year. So very excited for that. Yeah.
Now, we love to get recommendations for our listeners on what to watch and what to read. What's caught your attention lately that our listeners should check out?
Oh my gosh. I mean, my number one TV recommendation is What We Do in the Shadows. It's my favorite show of all time. It's a mockumentary about vampires in New York. It's so good. It's truly like nothing else, and it's so queer as well, which I love. So that's my recommendation for sure. Yeah.
I love that you bring that up. We're actually in the middle of a rewatch right now. We're in middle season 3. They just went to Atlantic City in the episode we watched yesterday.
Perfect.
It is so brilliant. I think there's a new season coming later this year, so that'll be pretty brilliant.
Hopefully. Yeah.
And what is the best way for folks to keep up with you online, to keep track of everything that is coming out, like those re-releases?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter or Instagram. I'm just Alice Oseman, or you can go on my website, which is aliceoseman.com.
Perfect. Well, Alice, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for bringing us this wonderful universe of Heartstopper and putting Solitaire out here in the US officially as well.
Thank you so much.